Hi, I'm Gregg LeFevre, and this is The Compulsive Storyteller, a series of short personal stories where we explore the idea that truth can be stranger than fiction. This week's episode is entitled New Year's Eve Descent into Hell. New Year's Eve Descent into Hell. At Christmas time, when I was 16 years old, I was invited to visit my Uncle Vic, a wealthy and successful architect and the designer of one of the first glass houses which he built on Jupiter Island, Florida. Visiting him seemed like it would be a great adventure and an opportunity to leave Utica, New York, and the deep snow that carpeted our neighborhood for sunny Florida. Little did I know how wrong my adventure would go. A little backstory is in order here. Uncle Vic wasn't a true uncle. My dad and my Uncle Vic were related by their ties to my great-uncle Bruce Oakley, who was a senior officer on the USS United States, the fastest ocean liner of its day. In those days, when royalty, presidents, and movie stars crossed the Atlantic on the USS United States, they sat at the captain's table for dinner, as did my Uncle Bruce. He had them sign his autograph book and collected signatures from the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Marilyn Monroe, Salvador Dali, and many other notables. My being his favorite grandnephew, he promised me that after his passing, the book would be mine. Bruce retired and bought a lovely property in Palm Beach, a Spanish colonial rose-colored stucco mansion, surrounded by a beautiful palm garden and a pond edged with Beaux-Arts carved detailing. Uncle Bruce had a charmed life that was marred by a singular tragedy. His only child, a daughter named Muriel, had fallen out of a tree when she was young and received severe brain damage that fixed her development to that of a 7-year-old. The few times I met her later in her life, while she was physically a fully mature woman, she was prone to have temper tantrums and would pull up her skirt and misbehave, often in public. After I was invited to Florida, I wanted to use my savings from delivering newspapers to pay for the trip and went to the Greyhound station in downtown Utica. I explained to the ticket agent that on my way to Florida, I wanted to visit New York City and Times Square. So he sold me a very long strip of local tickets from Utica to Albany to New York City, on to Newark, then Baltimore, and all the way to Florida, city by city. At 16, I knew nothing about express tickets. So I boarded the bus for Albany, carrying my old suitcase filled with summer clothes, Bermuda shorts, short-sleeved shirts, and a new bathing suit with palm trees. When I arrived in New York City, I spent the day seeing the sights. The suitcase full of summer clothes remained packed up, but wearing my winter clothes, I was nice and warm as I walked around the Big Apple. Then I boarded another Greyhound and headed south. The bus was filled almost exclusively with black people, and everyone was very respectful toward this little white kid traveling alone. One old guy who sat next to me in the back offered me a swig from his flask. I tried to gulp, but it burned my throat so bad I almost spit it out. An older woman reprimanded the man for his behavior. When I arrived in Palm Beach, Vic picked me up at the Greyhound terminal. As we drove away at high speed, I could smell alcohol in his breath. Our destination was his all-glass house on Jupiter Island near Palm Beach. I was amazed by the building. Its clear walls stood over 10 feet tall and formed an open rectangle around the swimming pool. It was here that I met his daughter, Susan. She was 1 year older than me and a really beautiful girl. I could tell that she sized me up as a real hick, probably because I was still wearing my winter clothes in balmy Florida. That night they had some friends over, including a celebrity. Vic's neighbor from across the intercoastal waterway was Perry Como, the singer, who I'd seen many times on television. I couldn't wait to tell my parents, who were big fans as well. No one seemed to care how much wine I drank, so I took full advantage of this opportunity and got myself a little drunk. After dinner, I jumped up from the table and darted around the pool to my bedroom to change out of my winter clothes. Just before I entered the room, There was a loud bang and a flash. I bashed my head into the clear glass bedroom door, which was closed, and then bounced backwards, falling semi-conscious into the pool. One of the guests had to pull me out. He laid me on my side next to the pool. I coughed up some chlorine water and quickly recovered, except for the big welt on my forehead. The whole group had watched me ricochet off the closed door and had a big laugh at my expense. When we all returned to the dining room, Vic, who was definitely drunk, proposed a toast. To the School of Hard Knocks. His tone had a vindictive edge and led me to wonder if he might be, quote-unquote, a mean drunk. All of this was my first disaster at my Uncle Vic's. There would be many more. The next morning, a bright sunny Florida day, Vic marched me out of the house and along a lengthy dock that jetted out into the murky waters of the Intercoastal Waterway. When he started to speak, again I could smell whiskey. "Now I'm going to put you to work so you can earn your keep." Then he asked, "Do you know how to use tools?" I was eager to prove my worth and enthusiastically answered, "Yes, I do," which was the truth. He took me aboard his cabin cruiser/fishing boat, which was tied to one side of the dock. There was also a dinghy and a sailboat tied to the other. He instructed me to unscrew various brass fittings, including the ones that held up the armrests of the mahogany fishing chairs. Then hand polish them, spray them with marine lacquer, replace the brass screws with new ones, and put everything back together again. He showed me all the supplies, then climbed back up on the dock and was gone. Everything went well. Then disaster struck. When I was screwing in the brass armrest holders on one of the mahogany fishing chairs, they had a flange that attached to the underside of the mahogany seats. He'd given me a box of new brass screws, but somehow a screw that was longer than all the rest was also in the box. When I tightened it, the screw's tip broke through the upper surface of the seat, lifting up a cracked chunk of wood. "Damn it," I said out loud. This screw-up, no pun intended, was not my fault, but Vic would definitely not see it that way, so I decided to remove the screw, replace it with one of the correct length, and then glue back the cracked wedge of mahogany. By now I'd been working for a couple of hours, and when Vic returned from the house, he did a quick inspection and seemed happy with my work. "Here's your next assignment. I want you to touch up the name of the boat painted on the stern transom. It got scratched up when we were hauling in a sailfish. Take the inflatable dinghy and this can of black paint and the artist brush to do the job. Your dad told me you were an artist, so do you think you can do this?" "Absolutely," I responded. When I paddled around to the stern and tied up, there was a light breeze, which kept moving the dinghy around, so I decided I would cast an anchor off the stern of the dinghy to give me more stability. That's when disaster struck again. There were several coils of rope and a small anchor at the back of the dinghy. However, the one tied to the anchor was not tied to the dinghy, so when I cast the anchor, it sank to the bottom, taking the whole rope with it. Damn, I said to myself. Now I had to dive in to retrieve the anchor, which was no easy task in the murky water. After my third dive, I found it, and when I came to the surface, there was Vic standing with his hands on his hips. "What the hell did you do, fall in?" He was so upset, he simply shook his head and headed back up the dock. I decided it was better for him to think that I'd lost my balance than I'd dropped an anchor in that wasn't attached to the dinghy. From there on out, things went much better. I did an excellent job of repairing the name on the back of the boat. The next big event was a deep-sea fishing trip on Vic's boat. Perry Como joined us, along with a couple of Vic's regular fishing buddies. As we headed out on his boat through the inlet to the Atlantic, there was a group of half a dozen porpoises racing alongside, frolicking under the front of the boat, which for me, squatting at the tip of the bow, was a thrilling experience. This was going to be a great day. The ocean was flat, there was a mild breeze, and after motoring for half an hour, I could see we were approaching a line of clear blue water, the Gulf Stream. Upon entering the stream, Vic killed the engines and said, "Okay, gentlemen, let's catch some fish." After a pause, he went on, "How about a toast for good luck?" And he passed around a flask. All the men imbibed except me. "Come on, kid. It'll put some hair on your chest." I still refused. The plan was to drop a couple of lines baited with live shrimp and reflective spinners. From a saltwater well in the deck, Vic pulled out a live bait bucket filled with good-sized live shrimp. We all baited our hooks, then Vic lowered the bait bucket on a line over the side where it floated next to the boat. After 20 minutes with no luck, he impatiently turned on the motor, gunned the engines, and we sped off to find a different spot to fish. When we arrived, he turned off the keys and reached for the line to pull up the live bait bucket. But the bucket had broken free because of the water drag of the fast-moving boat. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked at me. "Now we've lost all of our bait." I was so overwhelmed by the injustice of what he was doing that I didn't stick up for myself, nor did any of the other men. Vic went down into the cabin and slammed around for a while, then re-emerged with a frozen block of squid he dug out of the boat refrigerator's freezer. Next, he used his depth finder to move the boat to shallower water. 3 lines went into the water, each hooked with a big chunk of squid. Vic passed around the flask again to toast our luck. It must have worked because one of the lines hooked something big. The line whizzed out as Vic tightened the drag on the reel. A real fight ensued between the fish and each of us as we took turns fighting whatever was at the other end of the line. It was over half an hour before we boated a big fat grouper, probably weighing close to 100 pounds. The grouper was then slung into the fish well. We fished for another 3 hours and caught nothing, so we motored back to the inlet. But instead of going to Vic's house, we docked at his sports fishing club where the big fish was unloaded on the dock. Vic then instructed me to slide my hand into one side of the grouper's gills and haul it to a place on the plaza just outside the canopy over the club's outdoor bar. Then he told me to raise up the fish, surrounded by all the guys for a group picture. After the shot, Vic said, "Okay, Gregg, you can put down the fish now and join us for drinks inside." With that, they all adjourned to the bar. I laid the fish down on the concrete, but I couldn't get my hand out of its gills. They seemed to have inward-facing teeth. The harder I tried to pull my hand out, the more they impaled my fingers. I was unaware of it at the time, but all the guys inside and the rest of the members in the bar were enjoying my predicament. I tried prying open the grouper's mouth to reach in with my other hand to unsnare myself, which failed. I tried flipping the fish over, which made things even worse. Finally, I gave up and just sat cross-legged, attached to the grouper, on the edge of tears. At this point, applause erupted as Vic came out with a fishing knife and cut my hand out of the grouper's gills. With that, he raised up my arm like a prize fighter who just won a match, and the applause swelled. As I came into the bar, one member explained to me that the predicament was a sort of initiation rite of passage that everyone had gone through when they were young. No explanation, though, lessened my feeling of humiliation. The next few days, Vic had me doing chores around the grounds of his house, raking the gravel in the drive, trimming bushes, and the like. He wasn't around much, so I even got to do a little sunbathing. In the house, I found a copy of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea and read while lying in the sun. This was the best moment I had at Vic's place. When Vic returned, he had a 5-gallon white plastic joint compound bucket with a green lid filled with a red liquid. "You know what that is?" he asked. I responded, "I have no idea, but it smells weird." "That's because it's 5 gallons of blood I picked up from a Miami slaughterhouse. Tomorrow we're going out on the boat with the gang for a real adventure." In the morning the guys arrived, along with Perry Como. They loaded a bunch of equipment on board the boat, including a bucket of large chunks of kingfish and a bucket of blood. We passed through the inlet again and on to the Gulf Stream. Vic slowed the engines and proceeded to set up a small container of blood with a tube running down from it on a pole on the stern transom. The setup looked like a medical IV drip you might find next to a hospital bed. The tube was fed into the water behind the boat while we steered a wide circular course, probably a quarter of a mile in diameter, continuously dripping the blood. It wasn't long before the first dorsal fin of a shark appeared. Within an hour, there were dorsal fins of all sizes converging on the boat from all different directions. The engine was turned off so the sharks could cruise close to the boat. The middle fishing chair was by far the most elaborate. It was thick like a barber's chair and furnished with a tubular fishing pole holder that went between the occupant's legs. The pole itself, once positioned in the hole, had clip-on turnbuckles, so it couldn't be pulled away by a fish of any size. Also, the line on the reel was a braided stainless steel 2,000-pound test cable. Vic stood on the transom with a fishing cable line in hand, attached to a very large hook running through a big chunk of kingfish. He waited for a large shark to swim by and threw the baited hook directly in front of it. With the flip of its tail, the shark quickly took the bait while the other sharks closed in. The fight was now on, but this was nothing like the grouper fight. It wasn't sporting in any way, just a mechanical match with a shark that would inevitably lose. After it was gaffed and pulled close to the boat, Vic looked at me and said, "Now for the best part." He was holding a 6-foot-long metal pole. At the top end was a rubber ball-shaped cushion, and at the other end, a black funnel that extended down from the pole. Into the funnel, Vic slid a 12-gauge shotgun shell. He went on, "This is the tricky part, because now the gun is armed and dangerous. You have to make sure it only goes off when you smack it against the shark," which he then proceeded to do. There was the sound of a large explosion, and a plume of red water shot up, at which point all the other sharks attacked the wounded shark in a feeding frenzy, ripping it apart. I couldn't help but look away from the carnage to watch the expressions on my boatmates' faces, including Perry Como's. Clearly, they were enjoying all the blood and guts. Their bloodlust was the darkest moment in my visit to my Uncle Vic. Epilogue. Vic drove me to the bus depot. This time I purchased an express ticket to New York City so I could be there for New Year's Eve. My scheduled trip arrived at Manhattan's Port Authority bus terminal after dark on New Year's Eve, so I put my bag in a locker and headed for Times Square. As I hurried along in my summer clothes, I realized I was going to freeze my ass off, so I stopped at a liquor store and bought a half pint of Southern Comfort, a very high-proof whiskey. I was able to winnow my way through the crowd to find a good spot to watch the ball fall, taking swigs all the way there. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? So I made a New Year's resolution to forget all about my Uncle Vic.
And let's get ready to count together. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! We did it!
When I returned to Utica, I regaled my parents and sisters with tales from Uncle Vic's and meeting Perry Como, but I edited out many of my biggest screw-ups. They decided to ship him a new live bait bucket, inside of which they placed a small can of baby shrimp. We never heard back from him. Humor was not Vic's strong suit. Not long after I arrived home, my Uncle Bruce passed away. My parents wrestled with the decision whether to take Muriel into our family, and we made a group decision not to. Uncle Vic, it turned out, was already included in Bruce's will, where it was specified that he would take Muriel into his home for the rest of her life, and in return, Vic would inherit Bruce's lovely Palm Beach estate. Not surprisingly, he put Muriel in a home as soon as he possibly could. Also, in a letter he told us that he looked through the contents of Bruce's house and office and was unable to locate his valuable autograph book that was left to me. And if you believe that, you haven't been listening. Ready to tell your own story on The Compulsive Storyteller? We're launching a new segment of guest storytelling, and we want to hear your stories. Email a voice recording to hello@thecompulsivestoryteller.com. I'll play selected stories on upcoming episodes. Try to be as clear as possible in your recording, and we reserve the right to lightly edit them for length and clarity. Leave your name or contact information in your voicemail or email, and let us know if you'd like the story to be anonymous. I can't wait to hear from you. The Compulsive Storyteller is now co-produced by Gregg LeFevre and Fadia Montserrat, who's also arranged the music and created the special effects. Emily Ramon does design, research, editing, and marketing. Peter Kokoma has made our theme music and for many seasons co-produced the show with me. If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Compulsive Storyteller, and we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is independently produced, so we really appreciate all your help and support. Share the show with your friends, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. You can also check out our website, thecompulsivestoryteller.com, for more information. Thanks for listening, and if you didn't like this one, the next one will be another story. All characters and events portrayed in this podcast are based on my truth, with some names and facts changed for privacy. The conversations and dialogues are based on my best memory, but are not word-for-word recreations.